All right, so what other boards does the Mobile County Sheriff have influence over? Well, let's dig in. On the last episode of Stacking the Deck, we broke down the sheriff's direct and indirect influence over several public boards. We talked about how 5 of the 7 board members in one of those boards either work for the sheriff directly, or used to work for him in some capacity, or even with him, or simply have personal ties to him. I also mentioned that Dr. Timothy Hughes, at the time, I thought he may have been an OBGYN doctor or possibly a trauma surgeon for the sheriff's office, because the Mobile Police Department has several trauma surgeons that's essentially volunteer their services in the event that an officer is killed in the line of duty, God forbid. But since then, I've also been told he's actually brought on as a general practitioner for the sheriff's office, primarily to handle essentially routine medical issues like common colds or other minor ailments. Now, regardless of his exact role, the larger point still stands. In my opinion, his position reflects the same kind of influence that we're seeing across the board, not only with the 911 board, but certainly with some of the other boards, and you'll see one today. We also talked about, if you'll remember, the Mobile County Merit System Board, where the sheriff appears to have direct or indirect influence over 3 of the 5 members on that board, and those board members are responsible for appointing the Mobile County Merit System Director. Well, so today, yet another board. Now, today, we're turning our attention to another group, and while it's not a public board per se, it is the Mobile County Republican Executive Committee, and how, once again, the sheriff may have stacked the deck both directly and indirectly. Well, let's take a look at this Mobile County Republican Executive Committee organizational chart. So as we take a look at this chart, we'll see here with the Mobile County Republican Executive Committee and the board members. Now, this is essentially a public local GOP party, much like you have one with the state and certainly at the federal levels. But this is for Mobile County. And so if you look here, we have the chairperson, Mr. Ken Kelham, and he works directly for Mr. Burch. Now, some people have told me he was hired on as some type of government liaison for the sheriff's department, and now I'm hearing that maybe even possibly works in the grants division. I'm not really quite sure, but I do know that he works directly for, or did work directly for, Sheriff Burch, and I do believe he's still there. The second person of note on this board is the secretary, Mrs. Joe O'Brien, and she is married to a deputy sergeant who works directly for Sheriff Burch. And then, of course, you can see the treasurer is Mr. Butch Bloom. He is a staunch supporter of Sandy Stimpson, always has been, even during the annexation a couple of years ago, the push for some of those areas out in West Mobile. Mr. Bloom is a staunch supporter of Stimpson, and we now know that Mr. Stimpson threw and hosted a benefit party at his mansion with his wife, specifically for Sheriff Paul Burch. And so you can see 3 of the 4 direct board members work directly for or indirectly for Paul Burch. And I think these things are important, right? Because what is the Republican board do, right? Well, my understanding is they're not going to endorse anybody publicly until after the primary to determine who wins the primary Republican race for Mobile County Sheriff. Probably said for any local Republican race. But that being said, I think it's also important to note that they have direct influence with all the other politicos in the community and certainly locally here in Mobile County, and whatever direct influence they have with any other boards. I believe Kevin serves on another board. Well, the last chairman for the Mobile County Republican Board here was Latricia Strange before Mr. Ken was, and she is Paul Burch's HR director. And of course, I told you that her husband is an employee or a board member of the Mobile County Merit System. So what I'm hoping to do is show you how the influence all ties together and why it's so hard to get incumbents out of office, especially if you don't think they're doing a very good job. And then, of course, Mr. Andrew Peak used to be a board member with what's called MECREC, or the Mobile County GOP, and he works directly for Paul Burch as one of 2 chief deputies that's on the payroll with the Sheriff's Department. So now we have 3 public boards in some capacity: the Mobile County Communications 911 Board, Mobile County Merit System, and now the Mobile County Republican Executive Committee. So why should all this matter to you as the voter? Well, let me explain. Because these boards don't just exist on paper, they directly affect everyday people, everyday citizens like you and me. When you're talking about something like the Mobile Communications 911 Board, That's emergency response, and that affects everything that we do in this entire county with every jurisdiction. That's how quickly help gets to you or your family in a time of crisis. Is it being ran efficiently? Is the money being spent wisely? The Mobile County Merit System. That impacts hiring, promotions, and discipline for public employees, the very people delivering services in a government role in your community. And then you've got the Mobile County Republican Executive Committee. That's not just a political club. That group plays a major role in candidate support, messaging, and ultimately shaping who even gets a real shot of being elected in the first place. While they may not come out and endorse anyone before the primary, you can rest assured that with that type of influence that I've shown you here today, that certainly they are influencing those decisions on really who gets the real shot. When one person has direct or indirect influence across all three of these boards, it creates a system that reinforces itself. Let me explain. If you influence hiring and promotions, my friends, you build loyalty. If you influence emergency services, you build public visibility and certainly goodwill with a lot of people across this county. And if you influence the political machinery, you shape elections before voters ever step into the voting booth. My friends, that really does matter. That's how incumbents maintain power. It's not always about one big obvious move, political move. It's about a network. It's about relationships, familiar faces, and people who owe their positions in one way or another to the same source of influence. In these three cases, Paul Burch, the Mobile County Sheriff. Over time, that leads to something we call the status quo, a system that resists change because too many pieces, well, they're connected. And here's where voters come in. Voters have a real stake in understanding these dynamics because these systems don't just affect politics, they affect your daily life, your emergency response times, the money that is spent with the local jurisdictions in this county, your local government workforce, the choices you're giving on the ballot. Voting in your own interest means asking some really solid questions. Who actually benefits from the current system? Who has the most influence, and how are they using that influence? And are the options in front of me truly independent or part of the same network that builds on itself to keep the same people in office? My friends, at the end of the day, informed voters are the only real checks and balances on concentrated influence, such as I've shown you with these three boards over the last two podcasts. And without that, well, you got it. The deck stays stacked, and that doesn't benefit you and me as a citizen. These are my opinions, and while I do not suggest that anything criminal or improper has occurred with these boards or from any of the members themselves on these boards, it's just a reminder of how elected officials sometimes stack the deck to keep their jobs, my friends, because influence really does matter. The question still remains, how does this make your daily lives better? It's tax dollars being used at its best. Is it really being used and efficiently and effectively that affects you? Or is it really being done to keep the same people in office? My name is Paul Prine, and I'm running for Mobile County Sheriff. My commitment to you is to serve you, the people. Every politician says it, but I think I've demonstrated I can't be bought, I can't be intimidated, and I have truly lived a life of 30 years of service representing you, the people. I'm asking for your vote May 19th of 2026 in the Republican primary for Mobile County Sheriff. We'll see you again on the next program. God bless.